Hello there and welcome to the English Rare Film Festival show. And on the show today we have Simon Tytherleigh, who is an animator, makeup artist, actor. But before we speak to Simon, here's the trailer to his forthcoming stop motion animation film, The Legend of Jan Tregeagle. So I'm very, very happy that we got on the show a film industry veteran, Simon Tytherleigh. But as he said, he can't be pigeonholed. He's got so many talents in the industry. What inspired you to get into this mad world of filmmaking?
Well, hello, John, and thank you very much for having me on your show. Well, actually, I can pinpoint exactly what inspired me to get into filmmaking, and specifically into television. It was two programs which were put out in 1980. One was called Threads, and the other one was called The Day After. The Day After was an American one, and the British one was called was Threads. And what was so interesting about it was I was doing a lot of makeup effects on theatre shows and things at university, and having a lot of fun, and sort of getting more and more ambitious with the effects that I was doing. And this program came up, and it was about the nuclear winter, and it was what might happen, if the bombs go off and everything. And bear in mind, this was 1980. This was the height of the Cold War. This was cruise missile crisis and all that sort of stuff. And this changed the way that the whole nation thought about nuclear weapons. This drama changed everything. And I realized suddenly the power of story and the power of film and the power of a mass media like that. But most important is that you don't lecture people, you show them. You give them the story and let their imaginations run free, and then they come to the conclusions about it. So that was so powerful, and it propelled me into wanting to be part of all of that. And as a result, I applied to the BBC, to the makeup department. And I'd done makeup, incidentally, at university, because it was the only thing that let me work on lots of different theatre shows. And I worked on about 100 when I was there. But it also gave me enough money to be pickled in beer all week as well, which was great. So I was actually subsidising my drinking habit and had a load of fun. But I sort of absorbed the way that stories are told in a dramatic fashion. Stories are told by through plot and character and all of those things, and that was immensely important to me. And so I did quite a bit. Worked at Television Centre to start with for a couple of years, and then struck out. And I actually found it very confining doing some of that. But then this funny little program started up in Bristol, and a friend of mine rang me up and said, "Simon, this has got your name all over it. You've got to go and do this program. What's it called?" Well, it's called Casualty. And so as soon as I heard about it, I hot-footed down there and got onto it. And at that stage, when they began Casualty, the makeup department didn't really want to do much more than a couple of bruises and a few little gentle effects. And they were very, very nervous about doing any prosthetics at all. And my attitude was, well, if we're going to put prosthetics on people, I'd rather they be rubbish stuff that we had made rather than rubbish stuff that somebody else had made. And we're going to get the blame for it either way. So let's learn how to make it properly. And so we started. And to begin with, I tell no lies. To begin with, I actually did subsidize the BBC. Because I was given no budget for the prosthetics, so I went and bought the stuff myself. It's ridiculous, isn't it? And then it rose to £50 an episode. This is sort of mid to late 80s. £50 an episode for the prosthetics. That was all they'd give us. Nothing else. And so there were 2 or 3 of us working on the prosthetics at the time, and we were using gelatine and silicone, which was just the most disgusting industrial treacle stuff, and a lot of plaster and what have you. And we eked it out. I tell you, we eked it out. But necessity is the mother of invention, and I just had an amazing time on it. And it became the unique selling point of the program. It became the thing that people wanted to watch. And we were putting out effects on Casualty that nobody had ever seen before on television. Nobody had ever seen anything quite like that on television. And we were doing it every fortnight and eventually every week. And the thing is, we had to keep coming up with new stuff. So the director and the producer would come in and go, we've got this idea for, I'll tell you what, suturing in close up on somebody's face. Can you do it? And we go, yeah, sure. And then we go around the corner and go, how on earth are we going to manage that? And then we came up with it.
Isn't that the challenge of like big makeup things? I mean, for instance, it's like, say, like Planet of the Apes, when they first did that, the first one. Oh, you've got to do that. We've got to, the budget's this, we're going to throw that. Star Wars and all those kind of things. But you had the hard work because you were creating stuff that, like, you can take Star Wars, it's a fantasy, but you were creating stuff that had to look realistic.
Yeah. And I tell you what, it took me a few years to realize how tough I was being on myself as a sculptor. I mean, I'm very much self-taught with all of these different things. And I suddenly realized that what I was doing was measuring my sculpted pieces downwards from perfection, as opposed to upwards from a lump of clay, if you see what I mean. So perfection being, it looks like XYZ, part of the body or whatever it is, and lump of clay, gosh, you made the lump of clay into that, and so we were always measuring ourselves downwards from perfection and giving ourselves, pretty harsh marks at times, and really, really working hard at it. So it was a fantastic time. The other thing that was so amazing about it, I mean, I say I got into television through Threads, which was very much sort of heart on sleeve. It was a political program, even though it was a drama. And Casualty actually was quite political, certainly in the early days. And I felt very much that this was really important, that we needed to talk about all of this sort of stuff, and show it as well. And doing the accidents, the makeup became part of the story, an essential part of the story, which was absolutely lovely to feel that you were an integral part of it. So that was really important to me.
So what was the reaction of the actors? So the actors, but did you get to see that, to get to see your work?
Oh God, yeah. So imagine the setup. Because they didn't have a lot of money, they put us in an uninsulated tin warehouse in Bristol, in one of the Kingsland Trading Estate in Bristol. And so we actually had 2 warehouses next to each other, and in one of them they had sort of catering facilities, offices and stuff like that, and they actually had porter cabins inside, for all of this. And then there was one little room in the corner which was actually our prosthetics studio, and right next to that was the door into the next warehouse, which was the set. So we had this incredible advantage, which was we could put some makeup onto somebody and wheel them straight in onto the scene. So it was as fresh as it could possibly be. Because the worst thing that happens with makeup is that you do it at 7 o'clock in the morning, and at about 2 in the afternoon they go, oh yeah, oh right, oh we'll have bloggings on now, and of course everything's sort of tired and, you know, falling off and whatever. So we had this great thing where it was as fresh as anything. And we did the stuff on set. I mean, there were lots of times when I was underneath the bed with a syringe and some blood or whatever it was. So I've been in the show.
But you got to work on the I'll say the adventures of Baron Munchausen, but the headache of Baron Munchausen. Of how that it's sort of one that one prefers not to remember, really. There were a lot of... I didn't last very long on it. It went ludicrously over budget. I mean, it's a famous one, isn't it? It's a famous sort of turkey. Yeah.
We were based in Rome.
And the making of it. Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah. I've never been able to bring myself to watch it, actually. But maybe I will one day. And so we were in Cinecittà in Rome. So it was all fairly alien. And I remember once, so we weren't allowed to go out and buy our own makeup supplies. Some Italian bloke on a motorbike would go off and get things. So he came back with a load of towels, and we had Sting was in it, I think, wasn't he? And Sting came in to be made up or to have a hair washed or something or other. Anyway, the towel disintegrated, and he you know, he sort of, what's this? You know, it's just, oh, it's not in our control. Anyway, the only thing that I did on that I really would care to remember at all was I got stuck in a tin shed for 3 days with a medical skeleton, and I had to make it into the figure of death. It had been given some animatronics by the visual effects people, so there were cables and pistons and what have you, but of course it just looked like a plastic skeleton. So I spent 3 days working at this and painting and just going a bit sort of crazy. And actually, it was lovely because I was away from all of the politics and the nonsense that was actually going on. And Terry Gilliam came to look at it, and he was very complimentary, which was really lovely. Anyway, I didn't last much longer than that. So that was me. That was my brief glittering film career in the big movies.
Oh, well, so. How did you move from Casualty into stop motion animation? Where did that? Okay,
so right after a little mid-90s, let's see, I was doing other medical programs and things, and to be brutally honest, I was getting quite bored. I mean, I'd done all the effects that I thought we could probably reasonably get away with, and you know, I was I mean, some of it was very good money. Oh, I did some effects on a cow for a veterinary program called The Vet, I think. I had to do a cesarean on the cow. So I thought, you know, here we go. This is where it's at. But eventually, I just got really a bit fed up. Also, my wife had a job in Exeter, so I was sort of down here. Casualty was up in Bristol. Our daughter was born in '91, so she needed a bit of attention and everything, and I wanted to be a bit of a dad. So I actually I got out of it. I got out of the whole thing, and I built the house, or built the back of the house. So, this room I'm sitting in, I actually built, and I built the studio for the stop motion and everything. But we'll come on to that. So I spent some years doing that, and during that time, the whole drama thing got back to me, and I started writing plays and doing them as community dramas and things. So I wrote about 7 plays, and they were terrific fun, and they culminated in something that we did in 2012. And in 2012 we did Diamonds Are for Trevor, which was a little thing that I'd written as a Bond spoof, and it was the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. It was the 50th anniversary of the Bond franchise, and also this is Bradninch Music Festival, or Music and Arts Festival, happened to fall on the very weekend of the Diamond Jubilee. So all these things came together. The stars aligned. So I wrote this thing in a fury, And off we went with this silly plot with the Queen being kidnapped with her favourite corgi, Tinky Winky, and all this sort of stuff. And because we then came up against this problem, which is, well, you've got to have a car chase, haven't you, in a Bond film? You've got to have the villain's lair has got to explode. You know, you've got to have various sort of, you know, required effects. And Leon, who was working with me, said, "Oh, well, we could film these." And I said, "What do you mean we could film that?" Thinking, you know, filming for me was the analog days. Filming was big clunky cameras and, you know, people in darkened rooms trying to adjust colours on monitors and all this sort of stuff. I said, you know, that's sort of out of the question, really, surely. And he said, no, we can do that. We could animate it. And I went, no. I looked into that years ago. Can't afford that. And he went, no. You can use a digital SLR and you know, laptop and all this. So what happened to me in 2012 was the whole digital filming revolution sort of hit me like a truck all in one go. And we did it in this quite rudimentary but rather lovely way for the play. And it worked beautifully. It worked absolutely stunningly. We had a huge local success with it. And I suddenly had this realization that maybe I had sort of it was not quite too late to take a turn into stop motion. And Leon, he said to me, he said, you do realize that you've got all the skills for this, because I had the drama, I had the you know, the filming experience, all of that, but I also had the practical stuff, the mold making, the constructional stuff. And I sort of thought about this for a long time and realized that, yeah, actually, this is me. This is what I want to do. So aged 52, I realized what I wanted to do when I grew up.
It's better late than never.
Yeah. The trouble is, it's a very, very slow process. So from then till now, I've actually been working and essentially working towards one project. But I've obviously done a few other bits and pieces in between.
With you, you're quite an adventurous person. It's like normal people, it might be a holiday to, I don't know, Malta or something. You build a boat and take it, was it around the country?
Yeah, I did, yeah. So that was... Yeah, that took 8 years. But that was a really interesting project because... and I built it from scratch, from 150 sheets of plywood to start with, and you know, all the rest of it, and about 1.5 tons of epoxy, and 3,000 pairs of rubber gloves, whatever. The interesting thing about it, though, as a project, and this is the point about stop motion in a way, is that you've got to have the stamina, you've got to have the determination to see something through, and a long project can have its own satisfactions as well because of that. And I was listening to Daniel Knight's interview. 18 years to make Trollbridge is just astonishing. And that must have carried him through, that determination, self-motivation. And you get to a low point. You get to a point, particularly with building something, where you've got something that doesn't really look like a boat, that certainly wouldn't float, and you've spent an awful lot of money on it. So it's worth nothing at that stage. And you get to a low ebb. And then hopefully you can push your way through that and then eventually come out to a finished product. But it's the same sort of thing with a film, really. That you start with masses of enthusiasm, you do all sorts of things, and then you realise that there's a very, very long slog ahead. And making the boat told me that I didn't really need to be afraid of a long project like this. Eventually you'll get there. And there is a trick to it. And the trick is only to do a little bit at a time, and not to look at the big picture too often, to keep focusing on the small bits, and do each piece and then the next piece and then the next piece. So rather like you fit together your shots, you do each little thing, so construction and shots and what have you, and then eventually a film will emerge, we hope.
So moving on to the film, I have to say, if you want to introduce it as well and explain why the interest in Cornish legends.
Okay, well, the film is called The Legend of Jan Tregeagle, and he was a wicked, greedy magistrate in Bodmin in the 17th century. And the legend basically covers how he gets his comeuppance. So he's given endless tasks to do after death, and he wriggles out of them or completes them or whatever, and various things happen. And so it's got some wonderful, fantastical elements in it, the hounds of hell and all this sort of stuff. And of course, him coming back from the grave. And why did I want to do it? Well, okay, so there was the first thing was that somebody said to me, this is a really good project. You know, like I went to Casualty because somebody said, you ought to go there. Oh. Someone said, this is really good, you ought to go and do this. And perhaps I'm just a sucker, I don't know. But I went, yeah, okay. So I looked into it, and I don't know, but I think that the old stories are the best stories. You know, the stories that really look into human nature, and those are the ones. They're the enduring ones, and this is very much like that. It has been called the Cornish Faust, although he didn't really make a pact with the devil. But it's a wonderful story, and I hope that I'm going to try anyway, to change this loathsome character, this character that you hate at the beginning, into somebody that you feel sorry for at the end. So I want the audience to have a journey through that, and that's the sort of the moral questions that they're going to have to ask themselves about this. Does he really deserve that? You know, what are the, you know, our actions have consequences. We need to think about what we do. All those sorts of wonderful things. So that's what that's about. And apart from anything else, it just looks lovely, I hope. It's very much rooted in the Cornish landscape. And so I'm using locations like Rochrock Chapel, Trerice Manor, various others that I'm trying to identify so that people will go, oh yeah, oh I recognize that place. So it needs to be very specific to its time and its place. And inevitably, when you do research for something like that, you sort of go into the history of the people and everything else. So I've got a little cameo part in the film who makes 3 appearances. He's essentially the same character in 3 different centuries. So he's Jack Sprat, who gets kicked out of bed by his snoring wife 3 times. And the first time he's in a hovel in the 17th century, and there are fish hanging down and sort of implements around, you know, and it looks like a hovel, you know, and they're just on a sort of straw slab. The second time is the 19th century, and he's got he's in an iron bed and everything, home sweet home, you know, all that sort of stuff. And he's kicked out of bed and ends up putting his foot in the chamber pot. And then the third time is the 21st century, and he's kicked out of bed and he just presses his mobile phone, and the shutters come down over the window and shut out the sounds of the outside world. And my point with that is that we've got so remote from the landscape and from our heritage that actually we just shut it down, and we ought to get out there and pay more attention to it. It's a bit subtle and hidden, but hopefully somebody will spot it. Well, I haven't spent 8 years just working on this film. What I've done is I've spent 8 years trying to learn how to do all of this stuff, and I've built a studio. I've also built 2 motion control rigs, because I realized quite quickly that, I mean, this is going to be about 20 minutes long, this film. This is epic in stop motion terms. I'm doing it all the wrong way, by the way. I should be making 3-minute little tiny ones. But instead I've just went for the big thing, because I thought, well, I'm too old to do the little stuff, and let's just go for the whole Monty. So I built a couple of motion control rigs, because no one's going to watch a film for 20 minutes with the camera absolutely rock steady. And so learnt and taught myself the whole business with that. And then, yeah, sort of acquiring it all along the way. And of course, inevitably, there's a lot of stuff with cameras and lights that you need to get to grips with. With the cameras, we're using just a standard DSLR, but with manual lenses, with old vintage lenses. Oh, wow. So I've got a great stock of those. And that's what the professionals use. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, we've got access and even the pockets to pay for stuff that the professionals use. That blows me away. I mean, back along in my 1990s days, the equipment cost tens, if not hundreds of thousands, and was totally inaccessible to your average Joe, to make anything of any quality. Now it's all out there. Everybody with a phone, the phone is a filmmaker.
It seems it's not just the filmmaking with yourself. It's the story.
Yeah. So story is king, absolutely. And I've always, because I've done quite a bit of acting as well, I've always come from story and character, from that side of things, rather than from the technical side. And so the technical stuff is just the means to the end. Those are just the tools to get to grips with the really important stuff, which is the human relations. Do the question.
Yeah. So talk about acting and filming on water. Steven Spielberg famously said after Jaws, "Don't film on water," and then they went and made Waterworld as well. That was made on water. But you not only filmed on water in All That Remains, directed by Ben Telmy, Bruce Bardholtz, but you actually used your own boat in it and you starred in it. What was that experience like?
Yeah, well, that was a silly thing, wasn't it, to say yes to? Okay, so it was incredibly hard. I had a boat full of people who were not experienced with boats. So I was essentially the only person on board who knew how to rescue anybody, or to steer the boat back home, or to fix anything, or whatever, set it up. And that was difficult. So when I could, I would try and get Andy, who helped build the boat and sails with me regularly, I would try and get him on board as well. But there's only limited space. Fortunately, being a catamaran, it's relatively level and there's a reasonable amount of space for people to be on. So actually, as an acting platform, it was much better than, say, a tippy monohull or something like that. What we would then do is schedule a whole bunch of days when the tide was potentially right. And we'd say the first day that the weather's good, we'll go out and get the shots if we can do it. So we would actually have a whole load of them set up, and it was really, it took ages to make it. So it was quite a challenge. Some of it in the dark we could do on the mooring back on the X, but not a huge amount. And it always amused me to think that somebody might be peering out, looking across the estuary, seeing these strange flashing lights and things going on, and somebody hauling a body out of the water in the middle of the night. But we have one moment which was really quite terrifying in retrospect, and it was when I was coming back into the river and steering the boat in under engine, and I was just trying to pass a buoy. And at that very moment, the buoy let go and, sort of just drifted. So I was trying to get past this buoy and just sort of racing the buoy, if you like. Suddenly realized I was not in the channel at all. I was actually in amongst the moorings with the tide roaring in. And I had a moment just to flip the boat round and just drive at 6 knots. So the tide was going at 6 knots, and to stop the boat from crashing into anything. Everybody else on board was incredibly silent. They were really, really good. They just sort of shut up, and they realized there was nothing they could do. And I sort of steered it gently away, and we didn't hit anything. It was okay. And I had my collapse after that. But, oh dear. Yeah, it was hard. But I mean, Ben really wanted to do it and try it. And it was great to have done. It was a good thing to have done.
So Simon, what advice would you give to filmmakers just starting out, or people like yourself starting out?
I mean, I was really lucky. I sort of got into the BBC, at a time when they were taking lots of people on as staff and all that sort of stuff. I think, though, the thing that has changed is that filmmaking is so accessible now. So there's no reason not to do it, and to do the thing that really excites you. And that seems to me to be really important. In other words, just go and do it. Try it. But if you're into stop motion in particular, or if you're into those sorts of effects and all of that sort of stuff, then you've really got to work on those skills. You've really got to work on the practical skills. And I think for stop motion, it just requires such a huge range of different things. Just go out and learn them and find them from wherever you can, and hone what you can do, and then make stories. That's the truth. That's it.
Oh, fabulous! It's been really inspiring to interview today, Simon. Where can people find out about the film and what you're doing next?
Thank you for having me anyway. And if you want to find out about it, I've got an Instagram account thing, where I put up some little pictures and things, and that is Odd Planet Stopmo. So it's odd_planet_stopmo. I've got a Facebook page which is Odd Planet Studios, and the website which is oddplanetstudios.co.uk. So if you want to find out about it, have a look in there.